this is the thing I wanted to talk about, right? So, the New York Times ran a story recently. I'm sure you guys saw it, called "The Making of a YouTube Radical." And we'll get into the article and we'll get into all the periphery noise about the article and break it down and also contextualize the article, because as I said at the start of the stream, this is the latest concerted effort to peddle this myth that YouTube is directly responsible for radicalizing people. Now, here's something I'll say. There is definitely racist content on YouTube. There is definitely alt-right content on YouTube. The idea, though, that there is a proliferation of this is a lie. I've got data sets that prove this, which I'll show you. And the idea as well that YouTube has a vested interest in turning us all into white supremacists because there's more money in that is absolute nonsense. And also as well, you know, the definition of radical seems to have shifted quite a bit. I don't consider somebody watching fucking Ben Shapiro videos to be radical in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I actually find that to be quite tepid and mainstream. And we're constantly trying to push this idea that, you know, oh, if you step outside of this pre-approved, pre-packaged, homogenous, progressive way of thinking, you're immediately a radical. I think that's just such gibberish. But we'll get into that a little bit further down the ways. But let's just first of all talk about Kevin Roose. Now, Kevin Roose is the journalist that wrote this piece. You know, and he put a tweet out saying, "I've been working on a story for a few months that I'm excited to share. It's about a 21-year-old guy who was radicalized into the far right with help from his YouTube recommendations." And you can see there, unlike the original graphic they put out on the article, which I'll show you, which they've had to add a disclaimer for because it included people who were objectively not even right-wing. Everyone was talking about Philly D being upset about it. Philly D isn't even the person with the most right to be upset, because on there was Cenk from the Young Turks, right? Well, he's definitely not right-wing. And then even worse, ContraPoints, a YouTube creator that makes videos explicitly challenging alt-right and racist ideology. So she should have been really aggrieved, more so than Philly D.
You're not even a real journalism. That's right.
And I'll show you that when we get into it. NICE, indeed. So anyway, he said that he wrote this incredible story about a 21-year-old guy who was radicalized into the far right with help from his YouTube recommendations. Now, again, when you say to me radicalized into the far right, I'm expecting him to be wearing the armband, going out, espousing racist beliefs, being aggressive and trying to get into violent confrontations at peaceful rallies. For example, where there's groups of LGBTQ people, or any peaceful protest regarding a racist or theoretically racist police shooting, or whatever it would be. A far right radical, to me, isn't some skinny little nerd watching Stefan Molyneux videos, even though I do think Stefan Molyneux is a white nationalist. So the article that was pitched in this Twitter thing just wasn't the article that was written. And I need to prepare you for that in advance. I've been writing a lot about YouTube recently, but I've never articulated why. I think it's the most important and least understood force in our in our culture and politics, more than Facebook, more than Twitter. Interesting, isn't it? Yes, absolutely. It's the most important force in culture and politics. Not Twitter, not the thing I use, right? Not the thing I rely on for my living. Not Facebook.
That's right.
Which is
fuck Jeff Bezos.
Not my subs don't speak for me, Jeff. You know, not Facebook, that was proven to have had all of these pages that were deliberately, like, you know, being used as disinformation in an election campaign, and actually was the big thrust of Russiagate. There was a separate investigation into Facebook, not YouTube, but okay. All right, Kevin, because you wrote the story about YouTube, and you actually have a beef with YouTube because you've wrote a lot about YouTube by your own admission. This is the most important cultural force right now. Okay, good. YouTube is where young people spend all their time, of course, but as we saw this week, it's also a political battleground. What isn't these days, Kevin? What isn't these days? I can't even watch a TV show without being told why it's not woke enough, and if I watch it, I'm a secret alt-right slime ball, or if actually it's got, you know, haha, it's actually owning the libs, ha. Like, I can't do anything. I can't drink, you know, milk anymore. Like, you know, everything's a political battleground because a bunch of fucking losers have hijacked all of the, you know, the 10% lunatic fringe on both sides have hijacked all modes of discourse and basically are bending algorithms to their will, both left and right. So this is all we have to consume. It's a parallel media universe and a test lab for some of the most powerful AI ever developed. I've been interviewing right-wing extremists for years, and YouTube is, or was, I guess, the center of their universe. Take your word for it. It's where ideas are generated and debates are won and lost. Does any of this ring true with you guys? That he's interviewing right-wing people and they're going, oh yes, we must occupy the YouTubes because that's where we win hearts and minds. It's like, wait, didn't you just run a wave of articles about how actually they were using video games to radicalize people? Now YouTube is the most important thing? I don't know. I think you're kind of all over the place, honestly. I don't see a consistent narrative, right? It's where many of them get red-pilled in the first place. Nobody really knows how YouTube works. Even people who work there shrug when you ask why Video X or Channel Y blew up. It's a black box AI built by Google PhDs that figures out how to keep your attention and convert it into money. After the Christchurch shooting, I wanted to try to figure out as best I could how YouTube works, both as a technology and out in the world on people's brains. And again, this is very bizarre because the Christchurch shooting had nothing to do with YouTube beyond the guy deliberately putting in the manifesto references to YouTubers and saying subscribe to PewDiePie. It was broadcast on Facebook, and despite people, including, you know, people like myself who were linked to it by like tipsters at the time it was happening, despite multiple people mass spamming it to get it removed, Facebook let it go out and broadcast live. It's quite telling that you're not writing an article about how Facebook weren't able to stop a live broadcast of a mass shooting by a right-wing radical racist. That seems to me to be more important than saying, but he deliberately said PewDiePie because that was the #1 channel on YouTube, so he knew it would get media attention. The answer is actually quite simple, and he explicitly said so in the manifesto, which everybody would know if we were allowed to read the manifesto, which of course we're actually not. Right. Newspapers refused to publish it. The Twitter took it down. The site it was originally posted to, I think Scribd agreed to take it down. Any website that linked to it or referenced it in Australia and New Zealand was blocked. So I guess we just have the wonderful journalists to fill in the narrative for us all. Thanks. That makes sense. I don't like to figure things out for myself. I like people who think they're better than me to tell me what to think. Ha ha ha. Yeah, fucking ridiculous. Anyway, we're not getting into that. Does YouTube change them? If so, how? And what does that process look like? That's when I found Caleb Kane. He's a guy from West Virginia who went looking for self-help videos on YouTube during a personal rough patch and spent the next 4 years down a far-right rabbit hole. Caleb sent me his entire YouTube history, 12,000 videos in all, so that I could reconstruct his journey from left to the far right and back. It's a fascinating data set and not at all what I expected. I also learned that a few years ago, YouTube retooled its AI not just to recommend videos users would watch, but to change what they watched and steer them into new interests. The project was called Reinforce. It worked well. Reinforce is a classic example of an AI that will be fine in most cases. Who cares if the cooking video fans get steered into some home DIY videos? But in an environment with extreme politics, it can create gateways and draw people in. YouTube didn't set out to amplify extremists, and it's done a lot of work recently to reduce their influence. Again, I'll show you that not only does YouTube not amplify extremists, they actually have gone so far over the line, they're actually now suppressing non-extremist content like Joe Rogan in the US. And again, this has been proven with actual hard data. But over the last 7 years, it made a series of changes that played into the far-right strategy and helped it go mainstream. Anyway, there's a lot more in here, including some incredible visuals by an amazing team of designers and data journalists. I hope it helps decipher the insane, tangled world of YouTube politics and explain how we ended up here. Indeed, Dust. All right, so let's get into the article, The Making of a YouTube Radical. Now, first up, right off the bat, they wanted to do this like wonderful like graphical representation of the fractured landscape of YouTube and how certain videos come out of the melange of political information that you have.
That's right.
And in there, as I said, are some people that realistically just should not be even tangentially talked about when we talk about the alt-right and radicalization on YouTube. So here it is. Caleb Kane was a college dropout looking for direction. He turned to YouTube. So you can see here, again, there's people that I just don't think should be on this list. You can see Chank's face is there. And, you know, Cult of Dusty. He's a lefty. Why is he on there? You know, why is Big Man fucking Tyrone there? Big Man Tyrone is a fucking voiceover artist. Why is Philip DeFranco there? Why is Jordan Peterson there? They've tried to fucking smear this professor as being alt-right and radical. You know, it just doesn't ring true. And as I've said many times, whenever the subject of Jordan Peterson comes up, actually, his proposals for young adults to get their lives in order and to go out and achieve things they want to do.
Real journalism.
If people followed those and listened to what he had to say,
this is going to be a banger.
There probably would be less radicals. There probably would be less people falling down these rabbit holes, as you call them. So again, Big Man fucking Tyrone. That is so mental to me that he's there. And there's some people I don't recognize. I forget this guy's name here, the old dude near the middle, just under the word direction. He's a conservative economist, isn't he? Right? Yeah, Milton Friedman. That's the cunt's name. So, why is he? How's he a radical? And like I say, I mean, listen, there's definitely some people there that I think it's inarguable, to me at least, based on the pattern of their behavior, that they are either alt-right adjacent, which is the term people like to use now. I won't dignify alt-right with a response. It's just another term used by the media for guilt by association. But there are some people that, to me, do hold beliefs commensurate with being a white nationalist. Ben Shapiro isn't one of them. I don't think... I mean, I think Alex Jones is many things. I've never seen anything racist from Alex Jones. He's a lunatic, but I don't know if he's a racist lunatic. I don't think Gavin McInnes is racist, really. You could characterize him as an Islamophobe. Don't think he's alt-right. Don't think he's racist. It's a tough one, isn't it? Really, when like to try and say that like there's a you go from listening to that fucking Computing Forever or whatever his fucking name is. Is it Dave McCullen? Dave Cullen. Yeah, I'm listening to him, and then all of a sudden I'm listening to Stefan Mullen. You're like, I don't know, guys. This is not a landscape that looks like it's filled with radical extremists. Anyway, as you scroll down, you see it says, Caleb Kane was a college dropout looking for direction. He turned to YouTube. Yeah, who is top left? Wait, let me see. Wait. Oh, Dave Rubin. That notorious alt-right gay Jew. No. And yeah, Jimmy, is that Jimmy Kimmel in the middle? I don't know. This is a fucking mess immediately, right? But what a mess. What an absolute mess. Anyway, watch what happens as it filters out. Caleb Kane was a college dropout looking for direction. He turned to YouTube. Right? Some erasing here. Soon he was pulled into a far-right universe, watching thousands of videos filled with conspiracy theories, misogyny, and racism. We scroll down a little bit more. Right? Oh, a little bit more. I was brainwashed. Right? The making of a YouTube radical by Kevin Roos. I just want to say, this idea as well that like content we consume, right? I cannot stand that the mainstream media, which since 2016 has had more glaring errors in its supposedly factual-based reporting than probably in the 10 or 20 years prior to it surrounding this current American government administration. In particular, the absolute outrageous bullshit that has been peddled about the Russians and how they've hacked our electricity grid, a lie, complete proven lie, or that certain Trump cabinet members and campaign members met with Russians, only for that to be proven to be a lie, all the while ignoring this outrageous fact that the predicate for a lot of this was a dossier created by a British spy. Britain is a foreign government, right? He is an agent of a foreign government paid for by the Democratic Party. Right, so the Democrats employed a foreign government agent to gather intel and information on a campaign. Wait a minute, it kind of sounds like what you were complaining about with Donald Trump, right? So, but we just all have to ignore it, and we don't factually report it, and we don't tell you the truth. But that's not brainwashing or radicalizing anyone. Yeah? The guy who went and shot Scalise wasn't radicalized and brainwashed. Oh, no. Only YouTube can brainwash people, folks. Mass media can't. And other lies. What a fucking load of nonsense. What a load of nonsense. So when you see words like, oh, YouTube brainwashed
You're not
me.
even a real journalist.
What about 24-hour news channels? Do they not brainwash
right.
you? Does the CNN website not brainwash you? Does wall-to-wall coverage the same lies about the same topics? Does that not brainwash you? Because you're telling me that watching like a few YouTube videos will fucking brainwash me. So the mainstream media, infinitely more powerful, right? More reach. Anyway, I mean, this is quite a lengthy article. I probably should have highlighted some bits, really. Starts great, though. Caleb Kane pulled a Glock pistol from his waistband, took out the magazine, and casually tossed both onto the kitchen counter. I bought it the day after I got death threats, he said. The threats, Mr. Kane explained, came from right-wing trolls in response to a video he had posted on YouTube a few days earlier. In the video, he told the story of how, as a liberal college dropout struggling to find his place in the world, he had gotten sucked into a vortex of far-right politics on YouTube. I fell down the alt-right rabbit hole, he said in the video. Mr. Kane, 26, and again, it's hard to believe this guy is like an adult. Like I'll show you the video. It's hard to believe. Like, I mean, I don't want to point fingers, but I'm just saying maybe his intellectual capacity isn't all that great. Because he doesn't talk like an adult. But whatever. Mr. Kane, 26, recently swore off the alt-right nearly 5 years after discovering it. Now, keep listening to this term because they keep saying alt-right, alt-right, alt-right. They keep saying it over and over again. He was in the alt-right. He believed the alt-right. He fell down the alt-right rabbit hole. Spoiler, he actually says he was never alt-right. So, just putting that out there right now, when we read the choice chapters of this, he denies ever holding any alt-right beliefs and explicitly says so in the article. Okay? So, he fell down the alt-right rabbit hole so deeply, he disavows, even in this article, talking about his thoughts when he was in the alt-right rabbit hole. He disavows the explicit beliefs of the alt-right. So, yeah, okay, good. Great start to the reporting here. And he has since become a vocal critic of the movement. He is scarred by his experience of being radicalized by what he calls a decentralized cult of far-right YouTube personalities who convinced him that Western civilization was under threat from Muslim immigrants and cultural Marxists, that innate IQ differences explained racial disparities, and that feminism was a dangerous ideology. I just kept falling deeper and deeper into this, and it appealed to me because it made me feel a sense of belonging. I was brainwashed. Over years of reporting on internet culture, I've heard countless versions of Mr. Kane's story. An aimless young man, usually white, frequently interested in video games, it's the gamers, guys, visits YouTube looking for direction or distraction and is seduced by a community of far-right creators.
You're not even a real
Some young men
journalism.
discover far-right videos by accident,
right.
while others seek them out. Some travel all the way to neo-Nazism, while others stop at milder forms of bigotry. Like, there's no way to get off the train before mild bigotry, is there? Okay. All right, that's good to know. I'm on the YouTube train, everyone. Oh, wait, yeah, I'll just get off at the first stop. Oh, I'm a mild bigot. Brilliant. This seems fair and balanced. Okay, you've got a good handle. Nothing good has ever come of YouTube, obviously. The common thread in many of these stories is YouTube and its recommendation algorithm, the software that determines which videos appear on users' home pages and inside the up next sidebar next to a video that is playing. The algorithm is responsible for more than 70% of all time spent on the site. The radicalization of young men is driven by a complex stew of emotional, economic, and political elements, many having nothing to do with social media. But critics and independent researchers say YouTube has inadvertently created a dangerous on-ramp to extremism by combining two things: a business model that rewards provocative videos with exposure and advertising dollars, and an algorithm that guides users down a personal paths meant to keep them glued to their screens. And I'll just read you this quote before I point out why this is false. There's a spectrum on YouTube between the calm section, the Walter Cronkite, the Carl Sagan part, and Crazy Town, where the extreme stuff is, says Tristan Harris, a former design ethicist at Google. I've read, actually, Tristan Harris has his own website. He's got like some essays on there, and I've watched some of his video interviews. I think he did a TED Talk too. I've watched quite a lot because I'm interested in him. He's a guy who left Google because he actually said, I was there to be an ethicist and to make sure we didn't cross any lines. Well, we're so far over the line that I couldn't in good conscience keep working at the company. If I'm YouTube and I want you to watch more, I'm always going to steer you towards Crazy Town. Now, look, the idea that this is still true, that it has a business model that rewards provocative videos with exposure and advertising dollars, this putting this article out in 2019 really shows you haven't been paying attention to the landscape that YouTube currently exists in. And that is that anything that is vaguely provocative is demonetized. They are now running in tandem with this algorithm that you say is so problematic. They also run algorithms that scan your videos for swear words. So, my videos very often get demonetized because there's no way I could get through a 2-hour podcast without saying the word fuck. It's just not happening. So, we get demonetized on that basis. It demonetized images of guns, images of video game violence, the idea that the YouTube business model rewards provocative content just isn't true anymore, if it ever was. And if you go look at the channels that make the most money on YouTube, the ones that actually get the highest premiums, because the type of ad that runs on your channel generates different amounts of money, and they are all like toy boxing openings for kids, pop music, very middle of the road stuff. It's actually not politics. It's not extremist content. It's not violent content. It's not even video games content. So this is patently false. And anybody who has looked at the metrics of YouTube, anybody who's had a YouTube channel can tell you this is a patently false statement. And it's very well documented. I remember John, Total Biscuit, talking about this. You can probably still find the video where he talks about how, people say, oh, he keeps his stuff kind of like sanitized or whatever to make money. And he's like, listen, we are like because wasn't he with Maker or whatever it was? But anyway, he was basically saying like we were with like some very, friendly, ad-friendly group, advertiser-friendly group, and the money I make compared to toy unboxings and everything else is nothing. It is nothing. And he had a very successful YouTube channel with millions of subscribers. Anyway, here it shows, in the middle, it shows Steven Crowder doing one of his ridiculous skits, which I've talked about this, right? Steven Crowder dresses up as a woman fucking more often than Sneaky does. And yet he's always like, it's like, oh, how can we talk about trans people today so I can dress up as a woman? And yet he's mocking Carlos Matza for doing a Shirley Temple dance once. I'm just saying. Steve, it's all right, mate. We fucking respect what you want to do. Whatever your lifestyle choices are, Mr. Crowder, we're here for you, all right? But I will say that this a skit of his that they're talking about here, where it's there used to be this cartoon in American politics where it was like, I'm just a bill. I think Billy the Fridge did a rap using the sample, actually, but it was basically explaining politics as a cartoon to kids, and it was like, I'm just a bill and I'm here on Capitol Hill, na 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 na. I think that's the lyric that he's invoking there, and then you can see here it's to the tune of like Schoolhouse Rock or whatever. So this is obviously complaining about the transgender bathroom thing. A lot of conservatives are weirdos, and they worry about bathrooms for a while. Whenever this whole like discussion about trans people and trans rights come up, they're always going, well, if my daughter is in a female bathroom and a transgender person comes in and whips out their penis, I'll be out. It's like that. Why would that ever happen? Like, what world would that ever happen, you fucking weird cunts? Like, do we even imagine this? You have to be fucking deranged, you know what I mean? But but this is what Crowder was doing when he did this song. Now, is this radical content? No. It's actually, again, it's very bland and banal. It's offensive, but it is not radical. It's very bland and banal. A lot of conservatives bring up this issue because it's very easy to push conservative buttons around certain topics. this would not be the first type of content I put in an article talking about how someone got radicalized and joined the alt-right. So we can skip ahead now. It throws in some statistics about how many people use YouTube. Saying that 94% of Americans between 18 and 24 have used it. I mean, not a surprise there.
That's right.
Talks about this, blah, blah, blah. Right. Now it brings up how woke YouTube is, which, again, we all know, right? We all know the reality of YouTube is that anybody with even a vaguely right-wing opinion is in the crosshairs, because we've got 3 years of evidence that substantiates that. Yeah, there have been some aberrations, like, for example, when people wanted to ban people that was speaking out against LGBTQ and create a more ad-friendly environment, LGBTQ people got caught up in that because it's an algorithm. And as I say this all the time, you're asking YouTube to get involved, but they will never get involved with the human touch. They'll just write some software and hope it fixes the problem, and it never does. So you have to be very careful what you wish for. But that happened. But generally, these aberrations are mistakes, and they get corrected. What never gets corrected is the guy who had like a fucking channel that's like traditionally conservative or whatever, who gets banned and has all his videos deleted. You know, like, what was the other guy? Champagne and Top Hats? What was that guy?
Come on, Richard, you of all people should know that it starts with a frog meme and ends with you stomping down Berlin City Square in full Nazi uniform.
Yeah, it started with a meme. You know, so, yeah, like, Top Hats and Champagne was a guy that got fucking, like, had his entire channel deleted and got told it'll never come back. And I used to watch the occasional video from him, and unless I fucking missed something, unless he went mental the last year and started really going off the deep end, his stuff was just like, you know, look, look at the government creating a double standard depending on what faith group you belong to or whatever. So, ridiculous. Anyway. Like many Silicon Valley companies, YouTube is outwardly liberal in its corporate politics. It sponsors floats at LGBT pride parades and celebrates diverse creators, and its chief executive endorsed Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential election. President Trump and other conservatives have claimed that YouTube and other social media networks are biased against right-wing views and have used takedowns like those announced by YouTube on Wednesday as evidence for those claims. This just seems like, you know, again, I don't know if I'm mental. I don't know if I'm like really struggling. But like when I look at the evidence, it does kind of feel that way. You know, not in the way that, like I say, you saw my video on Steven Crowder. You saw my stream on Steven Crowder. I basically said it's not censorship. Him losing ads is not censorship. It's maybe a soft censorship. It's maybe a de-incentivization. But he is not being censored. He is not being silenced. Being up in arms about that, when it objectively isn't happening, shows you're a moron. But equally as well, there is a disproportionate amount of people that I would not consider extreme in their views that are targeted and end up having videos deleted or are banned, even if it's only temporarily and in error, and we see it repeatedly. Meanwhile, anytime anything happens like vaguely where it's like a very popular leftist gets caught up in the algorithm crunch, it's resolved very quickly and super apologetically. There is a clear disparity in how these two political affiliations, if you like, are dealt with, at least as I see it. But not, which isn't always a bad thing, by the way, because there is a world of difference between an extreme leftist video and an extreme far-right video. I mean, I will say that as well. You have to also acknowledge that, right? Like, that somebody extreme on the left is like, hey, let's go out and fucking smash the system, and everyone who disagrees with me is a Nazi, and let's punch them and beat them up, and yeah, that's not cool, and Antifa has been labeled a domestic terrorist organization, so why anybody would want to affiliate themselves with it, I don't really understand, but that's fine. But that's not as bad as, let's all get together and eradicate a particular group of people from society. They're different. They are different. And I have far less of an issue with the latter being focused on than the former. They all break YouTube's TOS, which is an aside. Anyway. In reality, YouTube has been a godsend for hyper-partisans on all sides. It has allowed them to bypass traditional gatekeepers and broadcast their views to mainstream audiences, and has helped once obscure commentators build lucrative media businesses. It has also been a useful recruiting tool for far-right extremist groups. Bellingcat, an investigative news site, analysed messages from far-right chat rooms and found that YouTube was cited as the most frequent cause of members red-pilling, an internet slang term for converting to far-right beliefs. That is not what red pilling is. You know, this right here reveals what they're trying to achieve with this. The reason it's called the red pill is that you really see what's going on. It's about breaking away from believing a narrative that is fed to you via media and social media, government and societal norms, and it's about breaking free from that. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to immediately ascribe to far-right beliefs, not in any way, shape, or form. Although I will say it's typically used to challenge extreme progressive viewpoints, but being red-pilled is not converting to the far right. Being red-pilled is supposedly being woke up. Now, that's a very nebulous concept. For example, some people might get red-pilled on, what they consider to be the truth about a particular faith, or they might get red-pilled on a particular issue, and they think, okay, well, I used to believe this, but actually, I've looked into it now, and political history is telling me this. Doesn't necessarily mean you go and completely jump into the far-right belief system at all. You don't hear it as frequently that people come back from far-right beliefs, but they call that getting red-pilled when that happens, which is a play on words of red pilling. So it's got nothing to do with far-right beliefs. And it's about breaking free from the illusion of reality. A European research group, VoxPol, alrighty, conducted a separate analysis of nearly 30,000 Twitter accounts affiliated with the alt-right. It found that the accounts linked to YouTube more often than any other site. I mean, again, as data points, these are really thin and flimsy. What about 30,000 accounts linked to ISIS? They link to YouTube the most. What about 30,000 accounts linked to children's television? I bet they link to YouTube more than any other group. Turns out, as we've established, YouTube is pretty fucking popular. It's like, it doesn't mean that just because people are linking to YouTube videos on Twitter, which is kind of one of the ways that you share content, that it means YouTube itself is a radicalization hub. That is, those two things do not correlate. Anyway, YouTube has been able to fly under the radar because until recently, no one thought of it as a place where radicalization is happening. And again, objectively false, because since 2016, and I will show you articles that prove this, since 2016, the media have been attacking YouTube as a radicalization hub because she lost the election and it can never be allowed to happen again. So everything became alt-right. And there's a Guardian article from 2016. YouTube was feeding me alt-right poison or something. It's been going on for years. And YouTube has taken steps I can't believe I'm having to defend YouTube. This is fucking mental. YouTube has taken increasing steps every time to placate the media, every time they've said, hey, YouTube's radicalizing people. Again, using the broadest term of radicalization, lumping people in who aren't radical or even right-wing with people who are alt-right and are racists and are bad people, right? They link it all together. And then they say, yeah, no, like, that's you're being radicalized. You watched a PewDiePie video, you're being radicalized. Yeah, it's insane. So this is from Becca Lewis, who studies online extremism for the nonprofit Data and Society. But it's where young people are getting their information and entertainment, and it's a space where creators are broadcasting political content that at times is overtly white supremacist. I visited Mr. Kane in West Virginia after seeing his YouTube video denouncing the far right. We spent hours discussing this radicalization. The back of his recollections, he downloaded and sent me his entire YouTube history, a log of more than 12,000 videos and more than 2,500 search queries dating back to 2015. These interviews and data points form a picture of a disillusioned young man, an internet-savvy group of right-wing reactionaries, and a powerful algorithm that learns to connect the two. It suggests that YouTube may have played a role in steering Mr. Kane and other young men like him towards the far-right fringes. It also suggests that in time, YouTube is capable of steering them in very different directions, right? So, just to show you how this works, right? And it's very interesting, isn't it, that it doesn't show you the names of these channels, okay? So what he said he did was, right, right-wing content. And I don't trust Kevin Roos to classify what's right-wing content, frankly. Right-wing content is in pink. Intellectual dark web, right, like the popular comedian Joe Rogan and political commentator Dave Rubin. That's not the intellectual dark web at all. Those people don't adopt that moniker. That's ridiculous. Intellectual dark web. Right? And then, during 2017, Mr. Kane began watching more videos from left-wing channels. Which, hang on. Isn't the whole point of this piece about how once you're in the rabbit hole, you get radicalized? How does this happen then? So you're telling me that after 2 years, YouTube starts recommending him almost exclusively leftist content? How's that working? How's that working? How does that show YouTube radicalized? This data disproves your point. That is mental, isn't it, to leave that in? So, in pink, going back to 2015, 2016, right? Mr. Kane viewed in 2015 and 2016 videos that often by Stefan Molyneux, which is where he started, with titles like Social Justice Warriors Always Lie and The Global Warming Hoax. Yes, Stefan Molyneux is a hack. He's terrible. He's awful. And even you could probably find me saying years ago that I didn't think he was a white supremacist, completely recant all of that stuff because he's just said too much stuff about IQ, you know, and I think I've showed it before. There's a series of tweets where he says, you know, society will collapse if it has too many people with low IQ in it. Also, we should therefore remove people with low IQ. Unrelated, his sub-Saharan African IQ. And it's like, dude, all right, we fucking get it, you racist cunt. We you know, I see what you're trying to do there, you know what I mean? Anyway, so then, right, it seems that while he was watching this, he was also watching stuff like Dave Rubin and Joe Rogan. And then in 2017, miraculously, he just gets leftism in his diet. So this says to me, not only did he not fall down the alt-right rabbit hole, he actually was pulled out and dropped into a left-wing rabbit hole because the data that you have used verifies that. I think maybe that when Kevin Roos put this together, he was just hoping you wouldn't actually look at the pictures. But, like, if I was including this, I'd have been like, wait, this completely disproves my writing. Like, can we leave this out, actually? Or can we just say, oh, and look, here it is up to 2017. Even though right at the start of the article, we talk about how it was for 5 years. It took them 5 years to get out, and yet you only show 2 years of it. So the premise is that even in the months where he consumed by far more left-wing content from left-wing channels, the fact that he consumed any right-wing content is a bad thing. Seems reasonable. Anyway, brings up 4chan because, of course. Then it talks about this, and this is important, right? Because Stefan Molyneux, a lot of people don't know what a fucking crazy creep Stefan Molyneux is. I think, wasn't he investigated for, like, for running some sort of weird cult or something? Like, there's a lot of stuff about Stefan Molyneux that people really need to fucking start looking into. But anyway, like Mr. Kane, Mr. Molyneux had a difficult childhood. He talked about overcoming hardships through self-improvement. He seemed smart and passionate. He wrestled with big questions. Molyneux described himself as an anarcho-capitalist. Don't know what that is. Also had a political agenda. He was a men's rights advocate who said that feminism was a form of socialism and progressive gender politics were holding young men back. He offered conservative commentary on pop culture and current events, explaining why Disney's Frozen was an allegory about female vanity, or why the fatal shooting of an unarmed black teenager by a white police officer was proof of the dangers of rap culture.
You're not even a real journalism.
That's
right.
His videos are
Almost
bad.
there.
Yeah, good on you, man. Appreciate the 10 months. Good on you, dude. So here's a 48-hour snapshot of what Kane watched in 2015. Wait, a 48-hour snapshot? What do you mean? That's 2 days apart. Oh, I see. Right, okay, good. Right, so let's scroll through this, right? So you watched The Market Value of Female Sexuality by Stefan Molyneux. He watched What Pisses Me Off About the Oregon Shooting and Chris Mercer Harper. He then watched End Selfishness Now, a motivational plea. Was mich an der europäischen Flüchtlingskrise ärgert, or ärgert. Don't know what that means. German's not that good enough. Stefan Molyneux's Epic Fail, which is unavailable now. SJW feminists whine about mean tweets, ignore real rape culture, #Gamergate. How Metal Gear Solid 2 predicted SJWs. What's that? Bud Dwyer's live suicide. That's the guy who killed himself because he was accused of political corruption, and he totally didn't do it, and he killed himself at a press conference. And Filter wrote a song called "Hey Man, Nice Shot," sort of alluding to the fact it was good he killed himself because he was a corrupt politician. And then it turned out he was completely innocent. He never did any of the things he was accused of. And that came out many years later, thanks to his estate continuing to pursue justice for him. Man commits suicide on news live television. So, guessing he was watching a lot of suicide videos for some reason. Viewer discretion advised. Suicide caught live on TV. Teens promised Illuminati membership in return for sex. Illuminati. Right. So, guys. Okay. This is meant to demonstrate how he's being politically radicalized. These are the types of videos that you watch at like 4 a.m. when you're battered and your brain stops working. And it's, you know what I mean? Like, he's like literally believing that fucking Bad Boy Records had an insight into whether or not the Illuminati was fucking real. Right? Panicked mainstream media begins killing off comment sections. The mainstreaming of pedophilia. which was a response to that Salon article, which I think we even talked about on my podcast. I'm in the crosshairs. Chatting with the Gadfather, that's Professor Gad Sad, who bangs on about Islam all the time. The rise of cultural libertarianism with the now retired Lawrence Southern. Feminism Wants Your Soul, the Flamengo File. The Safe Space Ploy Flamengo File, Episode 5. Anita Sarkeesian asks Google and United Nations to ban her critics. That did happen. Unknown. Facebook censorship, what they're not telling you. Facebook isn't telling us lots of things. Selfie culture by men going their own way. MGTOW. Neo-masculinity, the male backlash against toxic women by Paul Joseph Watson. The mainstreaming of pedophilia, another reaction to that Salon article by Paul Joseph Watson. Honey Badger Radio 24, Anita and Zoe's excellent UN adventure. The Honey Badger Radio is women. What is a Cookservative by Syrian Girl Partisan. If I remember rightly, I think it was Syrian Girl Partisan was called a Russian bot or something during the last round of that bullshit. Tesla Model 5 v Holden V8 supercar, like drag race, brilliant. He's gone into a drag racing binge. What does that even say? Syrian girl blows the lid off the migrant crisis, I'm going to guess. The truth about ISIS with Syrian girl. The truth about rape culture. Racist facts white people don't talk about. Black man to white people, arm yourself. Black are now more racist than white. The doctor of common sense. That's the most fucking skeptic name I've ever heard in my life. Hello, Dr. Common Sense. Where's my pipe when I need it? Fuck. Dr. Common Sense here. Let me tell you how black people are the real racists. Fucking get me out of that, by the way. Get me all the way out of a Dr. Common Sense video. Holy shit. Racist whites by black. Oh, well, yeah, whatever. Okay, that's not cool. So what I'll say here is that those videos, like, I'd say 50% of them are pretty fucking benign. And this is, by the way, at a time when, if you look at the data set just above it, this is supposedly when he was watching his most radical content. And then it's like, listen, this next paragraph is too much, mate. Over time, he watched dozens of clips by Stephen Crowder, my sympathies, a conservative comedian, and Paul Joseph Watson, a prominent right-wing conspiracy theorist who was barred by Facebook this year. Yeah, he was barred by Facebook this year because of his association with InfoWars. Who are completely deplatformed on Facebook. Let's not. But, I mean, you could include that so it doesn't look like you just did something mental. But no, we've got to be selective with our information. Like, why is the truth just never enough for journalists? Why is it like we must manipulate the truth by omitting facts or just straight up lying? Why? Why not just say, as he works for InfoWars, and then everyone would go, okay, yeah, well, InfoWars got deplatformed. That would actually probably do more to discredit him in a way. But instead, he was banned off Facebook this year. He didn't break any of their terms of service. It was just that everyone deplatformed InfoWars at the same time. He became entranced by Lawrence Southern, a far-right Canadian activist whom he started referring to as his fasci bae or fascist crush. Oh, no. He was at least 21 when he was doing that. These people weren't all shouty demagogues. They were entertainers, building their audience with satirical skits, debates, and interviews with like-minded creators. Some of them are part of the alt-right, a loose cohort of pro-Trump activists who sandwiched white nationalism between layers of internet sarcasm. Others consider themselves alt-light or merely anti-progressive. Well, you definitely haven't listed anyone alt-right there. Oh, and yeah, this is not the most cringe in the article. Yeah, you've obviously read it. IK3 noob. Holy shit. It gets far worse. And then just to basically explain, I'll just include a paragraph to reiterate why I'm focused on YouTube and not any of the other platforms that, we kind of have to rely upon as mainstream media, These creators were active on Facebook and Twitter too, but YouTube was their headquarters and a place where they could earn a living by hawking merchandise and getting a cut of the money spent on advertisements that accompany their videos. Actually, you hawk merchandise off YouTube, inarguably so. You might advertise it on YouTube, but you do not sell it there. So that's a lie again. That, little details. Got to make it just sound worse. Got to jazz it up. Few of them had overt ties to establishment conservative groups, and there was little talk about tax cuts or trade policy on their channels. Instead, they rallied around issues like free speech and anti-feminism, portraying themselves as truth-telling rebels doing battle against humorless social justice warriors. Their videos felt like episodes in a long-running soap opera with a constant stream of new heroes and villains. To Mr. Kane, all of this felt like forbidden knowledge, as if just by watching some YouTube videos, he had been let into an exclusive club. When I found this stuff, I felt like I was chasing uncomfortable truths, he told me. I felt like it was giving me power and respect and authority. Right, we'll skip past this part. So it's just talking about here how, like, when YouTube changed the rules, that it was like any partnered channel, that, in other words, to get partnered became easier, and any partnered channel could run ads, so they weren't being personally vetted by YouTube. This change somehow benefits only the far right, for some reason, and not any other political leaning on the channel, on the platform rather. YouTube people speaking out about it. We'll get to that later, actually. The new AI reinforce he talked about earlier. How it can lead people away from stuff, which it clearly did, disproving the premise of the whole article. Right. And this is relevant to what we'll talk about later on as well. YouTube's recommendation system is not set in stone. The company makes many small changes every year and has already introduced a version of its algorithm that it switched on after major news events to promote videos from authoritative sources over conspiracy theories and partisan content. I'm sure you've noticed this, right? If you've ever watched a video on, even if it's like, for example, I think one I was watching the other day for some reason, I was like I think I'm working on a show where we talk about why George Bush is the worst president ever, just to sort of contrast it. We're going to get it done ahead of the next election, maybe. But anyway, so I was looking at like George Bush when he was being interviewed about like what actually happened on 9/11 by journalists. And yeah, definitely W, by the way. George Bush Sr. was a piece of shit. But nobody beats W, Dick Cheney, all those guys. All of those guys. In fact, I would go as far as to say the only person that served in that administration that I sort of have any respect for is probably fucking Colin Powell. That's a separate thing. Like, Colin Powell actually said years after the whole... when they presented false intelligence, so we went to war with Iraq, it's justification for war, and it was all false, unvetted intelligence. he basically said that reading that speech to Congress, or was it at NATO? Anyway, he said that reading that speech was like one of the greatest shames of his political career. So I mean, like, he obviously had a conscience about it. Meanwhile, fucking George Bush is just there, fucking painting and being like, yeah, this is great, brilliant, love that guy. Anyway, so yeah, I was watching a video about where George Bush was being interviewed, and because he is asked a question about 9/11, underneath it had a thing like 9/11 was a tragedy totally and 100% committed by Osama bin Laden, exclusively by him, with the American government wasn't at worst or best asleep at the wheel when it happened. It was one of those, like, it was like, no questions here, here's a link to Wikipedia. I'm like, really, guys? Like, I don't know about, fair enough, I guess. Like, literally it cordoned it off. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. And like, when you consider even Michael Moore implied in Fahrenheit 9/11, he even implied that George Bush, that, his intelligence had sort of somehow decided, well, if it happens, it happens. It's very strange that YouTube are putting up this big cordon. You must not watch any videos about it. And now they're actively pulling down any videos that question the contents of the 9/11 report. So, again, it's great, isn't it, when a big tech oligarch gets pressured by supposedly independent media and the Fourth Estate to remove anybody critical of the official version, which contains demonstrable lies, and in just some cases it doesn't even address any of the important stuff. But why would it be any different when Dick Cheney and George W. Bush said they would only testify to the 9/11 Commission, not under oath and only in private and without it being recorded? So, nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Anyway, so it's good. It's like that episode of The Twilight Zone, the Good Life. It's good that YouTube did that. It's good YouTube doing that. So you'll see it. When you're clicking around, if you go up on a video with anything that's like contentious or has a conspiracy theory attached to it, go watch a flat Earth video right now, and like, I think underneath is like a Wikipedia link to the globe. It's just absurd. It's just absurd where we're at. Yeah, whatever. And trust me, people like Eddie Bravo, they need that. Eddie Bravo needs that. Eddie Bravo needs to put down the pipe, go in a fucking rehab, and then just be shown a fucking globe for a month with just nothing else in his room. And just, yeah, you'll be better now. Yeah, under any video talking about climate change, for example, is, the link to, whatever. So it's there. Anything contentious, and understand, obviously, I know the Earth is spherical, and I know climate change is real, and, whatever. I think disagreeing with the official version of 9/11, which includes a predicate for war based on a paper passport being pulled out of a flaming wreckage that destroyed two of the largest buildings in the world, incinerated 2 jet fucking planes. But this passport just so happened to survive, flutter down onto the street. And hey, everyone, we can go to war with Iraq because this guy's connected to another guy who talked to Al Qaeda once. That's all true, by the way. Go look that up. No, nothing to see here. Nothing to see here. Yeah, I think questioning that, I think YouTube should give me that one, but evidently not. We go to the Wikipedia page, so it's okay. Anyway. Yeah. I fucked up the VOD, haven't I? So that's what YouTube's doing. That's what it means when it says it pushes authoritative sources. This past week, the company announced that it would expand that approach so that a person who would watch a series of conspiracy theory videos would be nudged towards videos from more authoritative news sources. It also said that a January change to its algorithm to reduce the spread of so-called borderline videos had resulted in significantly less traffic to those videos. And we talked about that before with the crowded stuff. Now, if your video is deemed to be borderline, what the fuck does borderline to being right-wing mean? What is that? So this includes Philly D and PewDiePie and, you know, all this other stuff. You are basically your content can be banned or not recommended or suppressed because somebody looks at it and goes, this sounds almost conservative. Fuck that. So that's where we're at. So keep in mind what I am supposed to believe, the premise of this article, that despite that being true, despite the article saying it's true, apparently right-wing extremism can flourish on a system, a platform, where anything borderline conservative even will be put into a suppressed state of availability. I don't buy it, guys. Anyway. By the night of November 8th, 2016... Oh, it's the election again, isn't it? Why? Boomer. This election, dude. I have never seen... I've never seen a way with which we can just pinpoint a descent into mass psychosis before. Like, always, it's kind of like curious. Like, how did that happen? How did that cultural change go? There it is. It was her turn. It was her turn, and it didn't happen. And because of that, everybody goes mad. Because the Huffington Post said she was 97% likely to win. And they said Donald Trump was a Nazi. The Nazis are taking over. No, people just went out and voted, dog. Like, it ain't even a thing. It's not that big a deal. Like, just ride it out. It's just 4 years of a president you don't like, doing things you don't like. Must have happened before in your lifetime if you're old enough to vote. It's just ridiculous, isn't it? How everyone just lost their mind. Like, literally, people you thought were sensible and sane, and probably were, November 8th, 2016, they were mental. They woke up insane and have been insane ever since. And I don't know if they'll ever get back to be insane. That's the tragedy of it. It's mental. Anyway. By the night of November 8th, 2016, Mr. Kane's transformation was complete. He spent much of the night watching clips of Miss Clinton supporters crying. They're brilliant. I love them. I've watched them. Am I getting radicalized when I watch them? I think that's fucking hilarious. I think that's fucking hilarious. It's still hilarious. Watching clips of Miss Clinton supporters crying after the election was called in Mr. Trump's favor. His YouTube viewing history shows that at 1:41 a.m., just before bed, he turned on a live stream hosted by Mr. Crowder with the title, Trump Wins. It felt like a punk rock moment, almost like being in high school again, Mr. Kane said. I think a lot of people that were politically neutral were even jubilant when Trump won, despite what the media might want to peddle. Because Hillary Clinton was a loathsome candidate who rigged her own primary to get put front and center with a history of all sorts of political shenanigans, you know, some sort of weird, fucked up Democrat, neocon establishment, you know, just everything about her is just fucking gross and slimy. So if you were just opting out of that election because Donald Trump's a fucking fat, boorish billionaire piece of shit from New York who is, every time he opens his mouth, proves himself to be an idiot. You know, if you opted out of that election and you saw the boorish millionaire, billionaire idiot win over the disgusting established political criminal, then, you know, yeah, it probably did feel a bit punk rock, especially given people naturally gravitate towards the underdog. You know, like, just saying. That year, Mr. Kane's YouTube consumption had skyrocketed. Oh, yeah, give me that YouTube belt round his arm. Give me that fucking YouTube. He got a job packing boxes at a furniture warehouse where he would listen to podcasts and watch videos by his favourite YouTube creators all day. He fell asleep to YouTube videos at night, his phone propped up on a pillow. Probably he's watching his Fashy Bay. Right? In all, he watched nearly 4,000 YouTube videos in 2016, part-timer, more than double the number he'd watched in the previous year. Not all of those videos were political. Mr. Kane's viewing history shows that he sought out videos about his other interests, including cars, music, and crypto. Of course, he's a fucking cryptard. Cryptocurrency trading, but the bulk of his media diet came from far-right channels, and after the election he began exploring a part of YouTube with a darker, more radical group of creators. These people didn't couch their racist and anti-Semitic views in sarcastic memes, and they didn't speak in dog whistles. One channel, run by Jared Taylor, the editor of the white nationalist magazine American Renaissance, posted videos with titles like "Refugee Invasion is European Suicide." Other posted clips of interviews with white supremacists like Richard Spencer and David Duke. Mr. Kane never bought... this is the key part. So, listen. Richard Spencer, definite racist, white nationalist, piece of shit. Can't stand him. David Duke, obvious fucking ass clown. They've kept quiet about him promoting Ilhan Omar, though, in the Democratic Party. He says, I endorse everything she says because she's anti-Israel. I love her. No, it hasn't been blanket coverage about that. Yet I do seem to remember that even when Donald Trump disavowed David Duke on something like no less than 28 separate occasions, people were saying, well, why will Donald Trump disavow him? No, he has. He's disavowed him like 28 times on this campaign trail alone. There's video footage of him doing it. There's video footage of him saying he's not going to do it again. But it's fine. It's fine. And meanwhile, David Duke was going, yeah, Ilhan Omar's brilliant. I might even vote Democrat because of her. And everyone's like, no, fucking hell. All of those think pieces with the headline, what does it say about your political party if David Duke endorses it? All of those headlines, fucking scrap it. Burn him, throw him out. Get him out. And again, it's this idea that, you know, here's the narrative. We all know David Duke's a piece of shit, and David Duke's endorsed a Republican. By extension, the Republicans are a piece of shit. He's endorsed Donald Trump. Donald Trump must be a racist, must be KKK, must be the same as him. Donald Trump's disavowed him. Donald Trump's, even in the past, historically said he wants nothing to do with politics if David Duke's going to be involved or even loosely affiliated with a party. He has got a decades-old history of saying negative things about David Duke, but you have to believe that because David Duke has said he likes Donald Trump, that Donald Trump and him are the same. Now David Duke is saying he likes Ilhan Omar and might come back to the Democrats. All of a sudden, we got to shut up and pretend that isn't happening. And, well, actually, what does that mean? I mean, he's clearly doing it to be a troll, and who listens to David Duke anyway? Yeah, it's weird when the boot's on the other fucking foot. If only there was a way to consistently apply these rules. Shame all the media's fucking wrapped up. Shame. Wonder why they want to shut down YouTube, guys. Anyway. This is the key part. How many times have we been told over the course of this article that the guy that it's about, Caleb Kane, is alt-right? Off the top of my head, I can count 5 or 6. So, Mr. Kane never bought into the far right's most extreme views, like Holocaust denial or the need for a white ethno-state. Wait, what? But those are the defining qualities of being alt-right and being a white nationalist. So, again, let me just get this straight, okay? The premise of the article is that YouTube radicalizes people, yet, despite a chart that shows his content consumption got more left-wing over the 5 years you invoke as proof, and despite the fact that he was exposed to right-wing content, he never actually believed any of the extreme right-wing beliefs. You decide to include all this and go, see, look, you got radicalized. Real fucking radical when he won't actually believe the radical component of it. Like, how? How can you be putting this article together as a journalist and be like, yep, that does it. Got him. That proves everything. Like, you have every time you've presented anecdotal or data-driven evidence, you have disproved the central premise of the article. It's just crazy. And yeah, exactly, Mr. Saber 1132. It is. When you start to realize that, yeah, there's right-wing fucking hustlers and grifters, but mate, they got them on the other side too. And the worst grifters of all are the people that come out and try and make it out like, oh, we are just but lowly journalists who are so weak and have no voice and no power, and we work for these failing publications that are only propped up by the grace of benevolent corporations. Fuck you, man. That's the worst hustle of all. It's so transparent what you're doing. You put out a fucking sensationalist headline and people just read that and don't read any of the substantive part of your article, which makes your narrative strand look like an absolute mockery. Looks like it was written by somebody on fucking DMT, just moving from one fractured idea to another. It's ridiculous. There's no coherence here what at all, you know? Anyway, so Mr. Kane never bought into the far right's most extreme views. So YouTube radicalized him to a point that he never became radical. Got you. Gotcha. Still, far right ideology bled into his daily life. He began referring to himself as a tradcon, a traditional conservative committed to old-fashioned gender norms. How is that? Listen, I don't subscribe to that belief. And frankly, I don't give a fuck. I just got better things to think about. Call yourself whatever, frankly. If it's silly, if I think it's silly, I might point it out. But I don't think, if a guy gets gender reassignment and becomes a woman, vice versa, or whatever, it's like, I just don't care. That's like, let's just treat people like humans. That's where I'm at, right? I don't understand why some people get hung up on it, but some people do, and that's not far right. Some people believe they have a scientific basis for the argument. I don't think those people are evil or far right or radical or neo-Nazi. It's just a point of view, isn't it? It's just a point of view. I saw a video the other day of a Scottish student being suspended by school because in class he said, I believe there are only two genders. And it's like, if a school isn't a place to have that discussion, then where is it? Where do we have that talk? And again, we all know what society's dominant viewpoint is now, but it doesn't make you a radical alt-right, far-right person if you want to have that discussion and you don't believe the prescribed narrative. And it's an incredibly dangerous pigeonholing of thought and narrowing of intellectual scope if you say it is. So he called himself a traditional conservative. By the way, a traditional conservative has nothing in common with the alt-right. So, might have some problematic thoughts themselves like this, but they have nothing in common with the alt-right. So he called himself a tradcon, and we're now going to have to ride out this lie and pretend that he was radicalized. He dated an evangelical Christian woman, and he fought with his liberal friends. Oh, no. He dated an evangelical. Like, how dare he? How dare he? Don't you know what those evangelicals believe? How dare he date an evangelical woman? Don't get me wrong. I'm sure she was an insufferable twat. Right? But his choice. But no, evangelical woman. Bad. Some of Mr. Kane's... It was kind of sad, said Zelda Waite, a friend of Mr. Kane's from high school. I was just like, wow, what happened? How did you get this way? In other words, disagreeing with his liberal friends. I've got friends that are more liberal than even me. And we have disagreements sometimes. I got friends who are to the right of me, and we disagree. You can disagree with your friends, guys. It's okay. If a friendship can't survive a disagreement, it's probably not really a friendship. Just letting you know that in advance, right? Rules to live by. Some of Mr. Kane's favourite YouTube creators were shifting their politics too. Mr. Molyneux in particular seemed to be veering further to the right. Oh yes, this part is fair. He fixated on race realism. Yep, he surely did. He surely did. As Mr. Molyneux promoted white nationalists, his YouTube channel kept growing. He now has more than 900,000 subscribers, and his videos have been watched nearly 300 million times. Of course, by this point, as we saw, Caleb wasn't watching Stefan Molyneux. Caleb was watching a lot of left-wing content. So, not too sure how this is relevant to how Caleb got radicalized when he didn't even get radicalized, but okay. Neither Mr. Molyneux or Miss Southern responded to a request for comment. Okay. And then they quote Stefan Molyneux saying, if you ban people's videos, you're not really stopping them. In 2018, nearly 4 years after Mr. Kane had begun watching far-right wing YouTube videos, a new kind of video began appearing in his recommendations. These videos were made by left-wing creators, but they mimicked the aesthetics of right-wing YouTube. I don't know what they are. A ContraPoints video doesn't look like any right-wing YouTuber video I've ever seen, by the way. She makes really cool videos. Don't agree with them all, but the level of work and craft that goes into them is phenomenal. These videos are made by left-wing creators, but they mimic the aesthetics of right-wing YouTube down to the combative titles and the mocking use of words like triggered and snowflake. One video was a debate about immigration between Miss Southern and Stephen Burnell, a liberal YouTuber known as Destiny. Hey, Kevin, my advice, maybe don't dig too much into his past, brother, because, and you know, I think when you use the phrase low IQ N-word to describe another human being, you know, you lose a bit of your liberal credentials, don't you? You can debate everyone and call them idiots, but, yeah, probably something to think about, innit? Mr. Kane watched the video to cheer on Miss Southern, his fashy bae, but Mr. Burnell was a better debater, and Mr. Kane reluctantly declared him the winner. Mr. Kane also found videos by Natalie Wynn, a former academic philosopher who goes by the name ContraPoints. Miss Wynn wore elaborate costumes and did drag-style performances in which she explained why Western culture wasn't under attack from immigrants and why race was a social construct. Unlike most progressives Mr. Kane had seen take on the right, Mr. Burnell and Miss Wynn were funny and engaging. They spoke the native language of YouTube, and they didn't get outraged by far-right ideas. Instead, they rolled their eyes at them and made them seem shallow and unsophisticated. I noticed the right-wing people were taking these old-fashioned knee-jerk reactionary politics and packing them as edgy punk rock, Miss Wynn told me. One of my goals was to take the excitement out of it. When Mr. Kane first saw these videos, he dismissed them as left-wing propaganda, but he watched more, and he started to wonder if people like Miss Wynn had a point. Her videos persuasively used research and citations to rebut the right-wing talking points he had absorbed. I just kept watching more and more of that content, sympathizing and empathizing with her, and also seeing that, wow, she really knows what she's talking about. Oh, this is unfortunate. Oh, no. Miss Wynn and Mr. Burnell are part of a new group of YouTubers who are trying to build a counterweight to YouTube's far-right flank. The group calls itself BreadTube. Oh, no. Oh, no. A reference to the left-wing anarchist Peter Kropotkin's 1892 book, The Conquest of Bread. It also includes people like Oliver Thorne, a British philosopher, blah, blah. Oh, man, I never thought I'd say this. I feel so sorry for Stephen. The poor guy getting lumped in with the fucking bread tubers like shit. Oh, God. Oh, no. Like, straight up, like, obviously we don't talk anymore, man, but no one deserves that. No one deserves that, especially because that's like inarguably, even now with the 180 in politics he's done. Okay, it's not actually a 180; it's like a 175. Because there is just there's just no way like he's got it. Like BreadTube, a lot of them are like, you know, socialists and smash the system, anarcho, anarchists and stuff, which is why they are named after Kropotkin, one of the founders of what was it, anarcho-socialism, which I always thought was oxymoronic when I read about it at college, but whatever. Yeah, like Stephen isn't in that group. He's a very different beast. And their audience is insufferable. It's like the Chapo Trap House people. This is what I mean. Basically what you have on the internet, is like you've got like personality archetypes, and in this column over here, let's say, there's just like fucking losers, like just people who are just desperate to latch on to anything and then be like completely over the top and make that thing their entire identity. And those people actually will just gravitate to any extremist group. And this is what I mean. The alt-right losers and the Chapo cells, they've got like way more in common than they would care to fucking look at if they actually analyzed it. Nobody deserves that shit in your audience. Of either denomination, because they're just fucking losers that just want to take things to the most far extremes because they've got nothing else going on in their lives. So yeah, like fuck, Stephen doesn't deserve getting lumped in with that at all. That's like, that like sucks. Because I know as well, like, obviously, again, not talking to him, but I think it's apparent, like, there's a component of his audience he has right now that he wishes he just didn't have. It was good for a while, but you opened up the floodgates, and some of those losers and lunatics have gravitated towards you now. This article will not help with that, and it's such a mischaracterization of his beliefs by lumping him in with BreadTube. Natalie and Destiny made a bridge over to my side, Mr. Kane said, and I was interested. And it was interesting and compelling enough that I walked across it. See, and here's the thing. I don't think ContraPoints is like... I don't think it's fair to classify her as BreadTube, honestly. I think she is more like socialist-leaning than Stephen is. But I don't see a lot of her videos. Like, I've pretty much watched every video she's ever put out. I don't recall any video where she's, like, advocating... for socialism per se or any of that stuff, where you see a lot of the BreadTubers and the Chapo guys are like that. Her stuff's like a lot more philosophical in nature. Her stuff about like autogynephobia and stuff like that's really interesting. But yeah, very, very bizarre characterization here. But, I mean, this Kevin Roose doesn't really know what he's doing, does he? Because, I mean, he's characterizing dating an evangelical Christian as some sort of indication that you're an alt-right radical. So, I mean, what the fuck, It's not even the most absurd thing in the article, is it? Unfortunately, the alt-right got a big head start on finding ways to appeal to white men, said American Johnson, a YouTuber who runs a left-wing channel called Non-Compete. We're late to the party, but I think we will build a narrative that will stand strong against that alt-right narrative. You just present the facts. You could always just do that. I don't know why building a narrative is so important. Blah, blah, blah.
And a real journalism. That's right.
Milli Vanilli.
Milli Vanilli. Shortly after... Oh, yeah, because this is the other thing as well. By the way, we'll get into that now because the article's kind of coming to an end. It goes back to the start of the article. Ooh, I bet he's thinking I'm going to get a Pulitzer for this. Ooh, yeah. Look, I've made the article circular and told his whole story, and we're back at the start of the article now, Ooh, it's just like Fight Club. Ooh, aren't I clever? Right, fuck you, Kevin Roose. So, yeah, basically, it goes back to the start of the article, talking about his new life, right? What is most surprising about Mr. Kane's new life on the surface is how similar it feels to his old one. He still watches dozens of YouTube videos every day and hangs on the word of his favorite creators. In other words, the new left-wing ones. It is still different at times to tell where the YouTube algorithm stops and his personality begins. Perhaps this shouldn't be a surprise. Our political culture is now built largely on shape-shifting internet platforms, which have made flipping partisan allegiances as easy as changing hairstyles. It's possible that vulnerable young men like Mr. Kane will drift away from radical groups as they grow up and find stability elsewhere. It's also possible this kind of whiplash polarization is here to stay as political factions gain and lose traction online. Yeah, who knows, Kevin? Maybe I'm right. Maybe what I'm saying is right. It's the people that are fucked. Yeah, just saying. They'll gravitate towards anything. Reward them for saying the fucking bad racist shit. Right? Reward them for saying the ridiculous, let's smash the system, destroy capitalism, America's the most evil entity in the world, blah, blah, whatever. You know, I'm a mad progressive now. You know, reward me for that. It's ridiculous. Near the end of our interview, I told Mr. Kane I found it odd that he'd successfully climbed out of a right-wing... Wait! You said he didn't! You said he got radicalized! Out of a right-wing YouTube rabbit hole, only to jump into a left-wing YouTube rabbit hole. I asked if he had considered cutting back on his video intake altogether and rebuild some of his offline relationships. He hesitated and looked slightly confused. For all of its problems, he said, YouTube is still where political battles are fought and won. Leaving the platform would essentially mean abandoning the debate. He conceded, though, that he needed to think critically about the videos he watched. YouTube is the place to put out a message, he said, but I've learned now that you can't go to YouTube and think that you're getting some kind of education, because you're not. So, basically, right, the article says YouTube's radicalizing people, and to prove that it's radicalizing people, it gives us evidence of a person who in no way was radicalized, didn't even believe some of the core beliefs of some of the content he was watching and consuming, and YouTube, because of pressure from the mainstream media to push people away from anything vaguely right-wing, even Joe Rogan, actually pushed him into a left-wing rabbit hole by the author's own admission, but hey, that's okay. It's mental. This article is garbage. This article is absolute garbage. Now, as I said before, one of the things you've got to remember about Kevin Roose is that, well, first of all, Kevin Roose has a real weird hard-on for YouTube. Because here he was talking in the New York Times. Come on, XSplit, give it to me, baby. Like Offspring. Right? He did an article claiming at the end of 2018 that the Year in Review Rewind had set off a civil war, right? And in this, he gets into some very weird territory where he starts talking about PewDiePie, and he starts talking about Nazi jokes and anti-Semitism and dog whistling and radicalization, and it's like, wait a minute, this is your thing, dude. This is your thing, dude. This is like literally what you write about all the time. This is a guy that just constantly complains about how YouTube's radicalizing people, and that was his best work, his best presentation. What we just broke down is the proof that it's radicalizing people when the data and the anecdotes actually verify the opposite. So, I don't know, guys. I'm not sold on Kevin Roose as a journalist. But here's another thing that you need to think about. Kevin Roose didn't really analyze whether or not that the person he was interviewing had a vested interest to be lying to him. Now, one of the things you do in journalism, I want to talk about gatekeeping. No, one of the things you do in journalism is you have to look at any particular ulterior motive because this is an article about interviewing 12 guys who all claim to be radicalized by YouTube. This is an article where you have took one guy and you're using him to hang the whole point of your article on him, right? Based on his experience and the information he's giving you. Well, the thing is, he's actually a YouTuber himself, and when he started, like the video he referenced goes back to March, right? And
You're not even a real journalism. That's right.
basically,
For some reason I just can't quit you.
thanks, I can't quit you either. So this guy, put this video out quite a while ago. Basically, it was on his channel Faraday Speaks, called "My Descent into the Alt-Right Pipeline." Now, again, understand he's doing the exact same thing that the article did, and that is that
Even a granny can be your weapon.
yeah, even a granny.
Watch the world premiere trailer on YouTube.
Yeah, Ubisoft make another shit open world game. Check it out. Right? So he made this YouTube video called "My Descent into the Alt-Right Pipeline," where he talks about how I became radicalized into a far-right reactionary movement. And I won't, this is like a 40-minute video. And this video is like really, I don't know, it's a bit bizarre. Like there's quotes in this video, if you want to go check it out yourself, where he says things like, "I'm going to quit my job and stay at home and just watch Destiny videos." Like, and it's like, wait, what? But you'll notice this video did get a lot of attention, considering he's only got, he only had a handful of subscribers at the time. He, it got nearly 500,000 views. ContraPoints herself came in and said, "Thanks for sharing this," right? So this video to me seems a bit problematic, because he actually says he's not alt-right and never believed what the alt-right believe, and has publicly even backed this up on Twitter since, again, it went viral. And what you start to realize is, wait a minute, this guy wants to create a left-wing YouTube channel, right? This guy wants to have a left-wing YouTube channel with videos in it, right, where he talks about left-wing issues. And again, if you look at his topics here, you can see, he's got, who did the Notre Dame fire, right? Because there was like a conspiracy theory going around about that. And, PewDiePie, obviously, you got to, if you're a YouTube, you have to do a PewDiePie video. And Polychad's AMA, where he's like talking to like 4chan people. And, Cat Black goes in on LeftTube, and then he addresses the article 3 days ago. He's up to 19,000 subscribers. So the guy definitely has a vested interest in over-exaggerating to the reporter, and definitely has a vested interest in, misrepresenting his journey and using the article to generate publicity for his YouTube channel. Now, isn't it weird that in that article, the journalist didn't say, Caleb now makes YouTube videos? Didn't say that. Said, "Oh, Caleb, he still watches videos." And wait, no. He's a YouTuber now, by the way. So this immediately makes me suspicious about the guy's motivations for saying all of this stuff, because he's using the term alt-right as essentially clickbait, as did the journalist that wrote the article, because he never held the beliefs that the alt-right believed. Now, look, the alt-right has had a fucking weird and up and down storied history as a term, going back to when it was originally coined, and it did mean new conservatives that were young and tech savvy, and that didn't want to, and this was a term coined by a Jewish professor, by the way. And they didn't want to be established, in line with established neocons or the Republican Party. And it was basically one of the early kind of ways to talk about populism. Then Richard Spencer co-opted it and said, no, alt-right's about this, and it's about being a neo-Nazi and everything else. And while that was going on, meanwhile, Breitbart were trying to embrace the old original meaning. So then Bannon came out and said, oh, yeah, it's a platform for the alt-right, Breitbart. And then, of course, everyone went, but look, Richard Spencer said it's Nazis. So Breitbart are Nazis. You done fucked yourself. And now it only means that thing. But I'm happy with that. That's fine. Alt-right only means that now. Right? So if you don't believe in white nationalism, you are by definition not alt-right. The end. That's what you chose, media. You can't keep making up terms to demonize people through guilt via association. There is no alt-right, right? That is bullshit. There's alt-right. Yes, we know what that means now because you told us you can't keep moving the goalposts. This guy was not alt-right, yet he made a video saying he was, even though he denies he ever held any of the beliefs the alt-right did. And an article was written saying this guy was radicalized by the alt-right. P.S. wasn't radicalized, wasn't even ever alt-right. So that's what we've got on our plate. Also, conveniently leave out, he wants to become a YouTuber, a left-wing YouTuber. He's active on Twitter. He's active on YouTube. He's making videos, and he's using the publicity to drive people to those videos. Just saying, be skeptical. Now, also, just in terms of, like, while we're talking about just what a massive fucking grift this appears to be, this guy did an appearance on CNN, right? Because obviously they jumped at the chance to run this.
Hacking is your weapon.
It is.
Watch the world premiere trailer now on YouTube.
You're all right. So, this is in, what, I gotta watch a fucking Bernie video too?
How does a liberal young man become a follower of the alt-right?
Right, so, CNN, as always, with an incredible handle on the facts. Right at the start, how does a young liberal man, I mean, clearly the guy probably never was liberal, I think we can establish that. And then, second of all, how does he become a follower of the alt-right? Well, the answer to that is, in this case, he never was. So, but okay, you carry on, CNN, because look, listen, we can get hung up on the alt-right point, and I'll be honest, I am focusing on, I suppose, a little bit of semantics, but I think that's important because I think we can all agree there is something wrong with becoming a far-right radical, but there isn't anything wrong with leaning towards more traditional conservative political figures. These two things are very, very different. And the premise of the article is he did the first, not the second, right? And the reason for that is because the first is bad, the second, not so much, right? So, anyway.
You're about to meet a man who says he was radicalized by alt-right figures via their persuasive YouTube videos. He believed their extremist conspiracies for years. But then he somehow de-radicalized himself, and he's now working to help others get out. Joining us now is Caleb Kane. Caleb, thank you so much for being here to tell your personal story. I think it is so fascinating. So just to bring people...
I do find it really off-putting that he looks like a Picasso painting as well. Like, it really fucks with my mind, but whatever.
People up to speed. Somewhere around, as I understand it, 2015, you were sort of at loose ends. You had dropped out of college, you were looking for direction. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, at the time you would describe yourself as liberal. And somehow, online, you found...
Correct me if I'm wrong, I'm just going to continue to talk over you.
...your way to these alt-right videos and websites. And then describe what happened.
Yes, thank you for having me on. Basically, I was depressed during that period of time and looking for an outlet for that depression. And I turned to YouTube, and I found a man by the name of Stefan Molyneux. And his content really helped me in a lot of ways. But what I didn't realize was I was being given a political philosophy. And over time, my political ideas started to change quite drastically, which was pretty clear to anybody in my life at the time. And really, it just took me into a place where I became further isolated from social groups and just started to ostracize a lot of people in my life very unfairly.
Let's talk about some of the things that you came to believe because of these videos. You came to believe, I mean, again, jump in if this is wrong, that other races were inferior to whites, that women, I think, or at least that feminists were overly aggressive and women, I think, were inferior to men. You believed that, I guess, Muslims were trying to take over Western civilization, or immigrants were. And how do you explain how you came to absorb those extreme views so much?
So I find this interesting because he nods his head, and I don't know if it's because of the delay, when she says that, oh, you believe that some races were inferior to others. A point like that it conveniently left out, and if you remember in the New York Times article, basically said, you know, actually, no, I didn't believe in the white nationalist elements of it. So very weird that what you'll see on this CNN thing is he actually, for the purposes of television, beefs up his beliefs, but still says I was never in the alt-right. So just it's bizarre. Watch.
Well, it was mostly due to the people that I was listening to. The people that I was listening to were selling me a narrative that, you know, cultural Marxists and, you know, immigrants and Muslims and basically liberals were trying to destroy Western civilization and install some sort of socialist regime. And it's the type of rhetoric you hear from a lot of these people online the whole way across the political spectrum. And really what it boils down to is it's digital hate politics, and it leads people to radicalization. And
not you
know,
though.
For me, in my opinion, radicalization, it's a public health crisis. And we really need to fix this public health crisis through education, through fixing people's communities, and through providing mental health support I didn't have growing up, and is what led me down this path.
And I'm going to get to exactly how you...
And you'll also notice when he repeated the things that he was believing there, he just said, oh, you know, it was this... He didn't bring up the racist thing. He didn't repeat that he believed the racist thing that he's contradicted. I'll show you his Twitter where he contradicts it again.
You pulled yourself out in 1 second, but also when you say it's a public health crisis, obviously we've seen hate crimes spike in the past years. We've also seen the rise of neo-Nazism. We've seen more violence. Were you ever tempted? Did you feel you were veering in that direction towards violence?
I mean, we've also actually shown that this I've shown the FBI statistics and stuff on hate crime spikes before. Not even this supposed big spike that it's had, first of all, doesn't take into account any of the fake hate crimes, because it's just reported hate crime that they use the statistic for. We have no idea of gauging how big an impact that has on the numbers. But also, hate crimes were at a higher point during a part of the Obama presidency, actually. So, I mean, you know, just saying, these are all statistical facts that you can go and check out yourself. But, you know, again, we don't say, oh, it's rising almost to the levels we had in, like, the first year of the Obama presidency. We can't say that, because then the idea that it's not a Trump-driven thing doesn't hold up. But yeah, you know, there's been an increase on previous years and previous presidential terms, but it's nowhere near the highest, and it's also nowhere near the highest we had while we had a black president in the White House. So, just saying. But anyway, were you ever thinking about violence, Caleb? Were you ever thinking about violence?
I don't know if I was ever veering towards violence. I never felt...
Right, so you weren't radicalized. Okay, end of interview. Right, no, okay.
Felt that way. But from what I see, the people that turn to violence are people that feel at the end of their line. They feel that their back is completely against the wall. And these were the people that we saw in the New Zealand shooting and in the Poway shooting. And these people were deeply ingrained within social groups online. And I think that giving people, relieving those anxieties that people have, those systemic anxieties that they have through, you know, their economic situations or their personal lives, it's fixing those situations that's going to keep us from seeing more violence.
By the way, we also need to talk about the role that YouTube plays. They directed you to more and more extreme videos. Once you found one and YouTube could tell through its algorithms that you liked it, that you were watching it, that you were engaged, they directed you to more and more extreme videos, and they need to take some responsibility for that as well.
I think what YouTube needs to do is they need to have very clear terms of service on their websites of what's acceptable and
They
what
do.
isn't. I am a free speech advocate, but
You're
what
not.
I saw on the platform was people taking advantage of this algorithm. And the algorithm does not care about what your politics are. It cares about watch time and keeping you on platform. The AIs that they use for this is called reinforce. And the whole idea is to keep you watching more and more. And extremists come online and take advantage of that.
It's very interesting as well, isn't it? That like he's sitting down and basically repeating the same thing Kevin Roose was talking about. Not talking about his own experiences with YouTube, but suddenly bringing up this AI, this reinforced thing, and how it's bad and how that's the right, which was large parts of the article he was featured in, but did not write himself.
So, Caleb, we're almost out of time. What's your message to other people who, as you say, have fallen down the alt-right rabbit hole? How did you pull yourself out?
I pulled myself out because I started getting exposed to other ideas. I basically started to educate myself on the problems and the issues. And I also started to reach out and get emotional support from others. And that is what we're trying to do with my team and I have a bunch of volunteers, and we basically set up digital platforms to try to de-radicalize young people online. And we're doing that through social intervention and compassion-based conversations. And it's really to combat, once again, this whole thing of digital hate politics, which leads to radicalization. And this radicalization is a huge public health crisis that we really need to solve.
Good for you, Caleb. Good for you. I will put on Instagram a link to where people can find the help that you've found. Thank you very much for sharing your personal story with us.
Thanks very much for the free advertising for my totally not a fucking grift. All right. Anyway, just as an aside, as I showed you at the start when we started looking at the article, there were people involved who, listen, it's all right when the boot's on the other foot. It always is with these people. Think how many times, right? Like, okay, there's been people out there who have basically said, like, oh, you're alt-right, you're an alt-right apologist, you're a right-wing, you're a neo-Nazi. I get that all the fucking time. Like, it's so mind-blowing to me. And people just throw it around like it doesn't mean anything. And there are very real-life consequences. And it's dangerous to throw that around these days because the nutcases that don't get radicalized by the fucking right wing get radicalized by the left wing. And those motherfuckers do want to kill you too, by the way, and will try. And yeah, it's milkshakes today, but it's acid tomorrow, right? And it's fucking, and it's... we're out, we're going to dox you today, and then they're outside your house threatening your family tomorrow. That's where it goes. That's where it goes on both sides. So the idea that if you continually and falsely label someone as being in the alt-right, being a Nazi, because we're supposed to believe that these people secretly run America now, when they clearly don't, and there are people that have been put in danger for being labeled that, and it's outrageous. So I did see some people get upset about it. I mean, the most obvious was Philly D. I don't blame him. Philly D's content is like some of the most like tepid breakdowns of news. It's basically drama alert for people who are like got an IQ of over 80. You know what I mean? Like it's not radical in any way, shape, or form. It breaks down everything that's going on. It does it in super quick staccato things. It encourages interactivity. So why Philly D was ever put on this fucking article at all, I don't know. And he tweeted and said, what the fuck is this? Now, again, if a publication ever implied I was fucking alt-right, I would immediately sue. That's just how that one has to go, right? I think I'm always surprised when people don't take legal action for that. I actually talked to a lawyer about this, about the specific defamation component, and what they've said is that as things stand, you would struggle to prove defamation for being labeled alt-right. I think over time that's going to change. They told me that because everybody's alt-right, supposedly, according to like the media, it's very hard to prove it's a defamatory statement when even people are calling the president alt-right, but if they were to call you a Nazi, that is a lot easier to win a defamation case over. I think that'll change, because I think what we're starting to see is Nazi and KKK and that stuff is like more hyperbolic and antiquated, and alt-right is the term that's going to basically replace that. And it's got the alt-right has a recognizable racist belief system. So I think of it. You know, I think there'll be some successful defamation cases for throwing that around if people want to put their money into that. But anyway, so they changed the article based on Philip DeFranco getting upset and saying that was updated. And he said, but upon checking, I still showed up as one of the last people associated with the escalating language, this time not Jimmy Kimmel. And they added a non-specific, but not all of them, caption in the scroll down. And this is what they added. A sample of the more than 12,000 videos that Caleb Kane was watching going back to 2015. Many, but not all of them, from which were from far-right commentators. Well, that's brilliant, isn't it? Because let's not explicitly explain who's who. I'm just going to use your image without your permission, right? And you're a public figure, and I'm just going to put you in this article basically saying that you might be a far-right personality. Who knows? Who cares? We're the New York Times. And then also, I think it was this one. Let me just see. It actually also got to a point where, if I remember rightly, I think he got sent a fucking tweet from somebody who bought the paper on like the East Coast, and he was in it. Let me just see. Where was that? Yeah, here it is. So it's not even just an online thing, because obviously with an online thing, you make a mistake and put in a correction. Once it's in fucking print, you have to wait for them to print an actual retraction. And no one reads that. It's always on page fucking 40, tucked in the back, next to the fucking hobo obituaries, right? So look, a buddy on the East Coast just sent this to me. They put the making of a YouTube radical collage on the front page of the Sunday edition of the New York Times. Now it appears that I'm also a part of a stew of emotional content. I'm going to ditch the internet today. See you Monday. And there it is for everyone to see. You got your Jordan Peterson on there, your Philly D's, ContraPoints again, inexplicably there. I suppose she is quoted in the article at least, but I still think it's outrageous to use her picture and imply she's in any way far right. So Philly D didn't like it, but here was the other thing, right? Do you remember the Young Turks?
Journalism.
Do you remember when Anna Kasparian had that fucking insane breakdown? Where she said, I'm better than you, right? Do you remember that? Do you remember? I'm better than you. I'm better than you because you're a Trump supporter and you're all racist and you know, how dare Trump win and all of this stuff. And she basically has said on multiple occasions that Trump supporters are racist, they're all Nazis, if you support Trump, you're irredeemable, you're a garbage human being, was her famous quote. Brilliant, great person, right? So imagine having the audacity, if you're the Young Turks, to object to Cenk's picture being featured in that article. Oh, but they did. And it's delicious. Yes, I'll vote for Bernie, whatever. Please, YouTube, stop radicalizing me to your socialist agenda.
YouTube is attempting to walk us through how it is that young men get radicalized to the right on YouTube, which is an important story to explain. However, even though there are really important kernels of truth in this piece, I just want to note that there were a few things that the writer here, Kevin Roos, did get wrong.
Really?
So for instance, when you click on the link to this article, the first thing you see is this interactive, thing that YouTube has. New York Times has, and they have photos of all of these right-wing content creators, and they include Cenk.
Well, oh my me. isn't it terrible to be associated with something that you absolutely decry, deplore, denounce, disavow, all the D's? Isn't it awful when that happens? Oh my. Will Cenk ever recover? Because, I mean, it would be terrible if you ran a channel that specifically did that to others at almost every given opportunity. I hope you guys, well, what can I say? I mean,
facing off with
it's rough.
Alex
It's
Jones,
terrible.
and I just feel like they included photos of some YouTube creators who are not radical, who are not, you know, on the extreme end of either, you know, either end of the spectrum.
So I know what New York Times said in terms of why they did that. I looked it up.
You actually looked something up, Cenk. Well, holy shit. That's a first. Do tell me more.
But I think they're still wrong. So what they're saying is they looked at the history of Caleb Kane, the guy that they tracked, and they put up videos that he watched. No, so he happened to have watched the video of the fight that we had with Alex Jones.
Everybody watched that one.
Well, but so did
Remember when we had that fight with Alex Jones? Everyone watched that.
everybody on the planet. That was but by the
Who's
not
this
even a real
creep with the
journalist.
shit haircut, by the way? Who's that guy?
That's right.
way, it's not much of an exaggeration. That was the night of Trump's inauguration, and Trump's acceptance speech was #2 to that video of Alex Jones coming onto our set. That was #1 on Facebook that day. So almost everybody's seen that video. That's also an exaggeration. Okay. Anyway, and Phil DeFranco's on that list.
Right.
Now this is great because you're like, oh, this is nice of you. Actually, you're gonna extend, you know, use your platform to back up another YouTuber that technically, I guess, is kind of a competitor to your channel. So that's nice. I mean, it would be a shame though if you immediately labeled him as being conservative with no substantiating evidence for that, because then that would just make you as bad as the New York Times, the publication you're calling out. There's no way you would be stupid enough to do that though, because if you're an intelligent political commentator, like somebody who could work for the Young Turks, for example, you would see that clearly being ridiculous, that you're calling out a publication for associating you with something, and then go on to try and defend somebody by associating them with something that they're not involved with. But there's no way you would do that. Okay, let's.
There you go. Yes.
Yeah, and Phil, I think, is a little bit more
conservative than we are.
Right
Yeah.
wing. Not more conservative than we are, right? But he's not at all radical. And so I get it. That guy happened to watch Phil DeFranco at some point, but you don't fully explain that in the article. So if you're just reading the article, all of a sudden you're like, is Phil DeFranco one of the most radical people on YouTube? And he's not, and that's not fair, and they should have put more thought behind it. But I think the substance of the article is both really good, as we're gonna explain, but also has bigger problems.
Yeah.
It does have bigger problems. Now, I broke down most of those. I actually think some of the Young Turks video when I watched this was very similar to some of the criticisms, which I guess sort of makes me a little bit worried. Let's just also as well get into another reason why I think this is a potential grift, because well, okay, so remember, the big selling point of the article is that he was radicalized, he became alt-right, and then he was pulled out of it somehow miraculously, even though, again, it just looks like he's a loser, right, with mental health problems to boot, and he dropped out of college and was stressed and was struggling with mental health problems, and latched on to one thing, and then because of how the YouTube algorithm actually works, was then just fed another thing. And the article even concludes he's gone down an alt-right rabbit hole, and now he's going down a left-wing rabbit hole. So, I mean, I don't really understand, but whatever. But here's the other thing. So, remember, the big selling point is that he was alt-right. Well, here he is on Twitter denouncing, here, a lot of what I'm seeing from conservatives is offense that they are classified as alt-right. For the record, I don't believe Crowder or Rubin are alt-right, but their content kept me locked in an echo chamber, which more extreme people stepped into, exposing me to radical views. Now, isn't it interesting, by the way, that despite the New York Times having access to apparently his entire viewing history, where are all the actual alt-right commentators? Where's the Richard Spencer videos? Where's the David Duke videos? Where I don't even know names of actual, card-carrying members of the alt-right. But where are those? If more extreme ideas stepped into the echo chamber, where's the evidence of that? Because you have it, you have the data, and you didn't show it. And then somebody replied with saying, in interviews, you say that you never actually thought white people needed their own country or anything like that. Can you clarify in what sense you were alt-right? You're doing all these interviews and branding yourself this way, but what radical beliefs did you actually have? And then he goes, I clearly state I was an alt-right civ nat in interviews. I've just watched your CNN interview. You didn't state that at all. And in fact, you were happy to just gloss over when they said you were a racist and a white nationalist. Now, a civic nationalist is not a white nationalist. In fact, again, those ideas are mutually exclusive. And now he's walking it back and saying alt-right. But again, when he created his YouTube, when his Twitter was blowing up, not when he created it, but when he was sort of getting traction because of the New York Times article, he changed the name. Caleb Kane, former alt-right. So, you were labeling yourself this way despite knowingly saying that you don't hold any of those beliefs.